It's a moment for finding our courage, having that fire in us, and we'll show it on the Senate grounds.
From Interfaith Alliance, this is The State of Belief. I'm Interfaith Alliance President Reverend Paul Brandeis Raushenbush in New York City.
In a way that could change things, that could make this budget more moral. I think we can maybe do that, and we got to act like we can do that, and it will change the perception of what religious leaders are saying or not saying.
Since the start of this administration, there's been a lot of attention on the barbaric treatment of asylum seekers and undocumented residents nationwide. Now we are looking at the budget for next year, and new cruelty is being revealed. We all know that the budget is a moral document, and this is a deeply immoral budget. However, one faithful response in the name of religious values and beliefs is coming to the steps of the U.S. Capitol on Tuesday, June 10th. And the chief organizer, Reverend Jim Wallis, will be back with us this week to talk about all the details. In some ways, the event on the 10th is building off of the powerful moment that happened during the filibuster that Senator Cory Booker had for 25 hours on the Senate floor. And at one point, he involved Senator Chris Coons. And at the end of the show, you're going to hear their words talking about the Bible and how the Bible treats the poor. Just one preview, there's 2,000 verses about how to treat the poor in the Bible. If you took it out, it basically, the Bible falls apart. So stay tuned for that amazing exchange that happened on the Senate floor between Cory Booker and Chris Coons. You won't want to miss that. We need voices like Jim Wallis's to be heard now more than ever. So make sure you subscribe, share, and rate The State of Belief at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platforms. Our library of past conversations includes almost 150 hopeful, inspiring interviews with guests like Congressman Eric Swalwell, Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum, Bishop William Barber, and many, many others. You can help grow The State of Belief with a financial contribution right now. Find out how at stateofbelief.com, and you can support and join the work of Interfaith Alliance at interfaithalliance.org. Before I get into the conversation with Reverend Jim Wallis, I want to raise up another thing that's happening in June that I'm really excited about, and I think it requires all of us to show up, and that is No Kings. This is an event that's happening across the country. I don't know if you all have heard about this, but President Trump has decided to throw himself a birthday party in which the military is his prop. And he is going to have a huge military parade in Washington that's going to cost millions and millions and millions of dollars, even as we are cutting money from things like, food for people and also health care for people. He's going to spend all this money on a military parade for him on his birthday. That's on June 14th. But let me tell you, the real action is going to happen in towns across the country. And when I say towns across the country, there are going to be 1,000, maybe 1,500 events. So this is called No Kings. And Interfaith Alliance is helping to lead the faith response for No Kings. You can find on Interfaith Alliance No Kings Faith. Just search for that. Interfaith Alliance, and we are rallying the faith communities to really show up for No Kings, because we don't believe in kings in this country. And as faithful people, we especially don't believe in kings, because in many of the countries around the world, the kings are kind of a divine figure. Not for us. We don't have divine political leaders. We have a democracy. And so it's so important that you, as someone, again, you don't have to be a faith leader, quote unquote. You don't have to be clergy. You don't have to have a leadership role at all. You have to come at this saying, we want to celebrate our democracy. We want to celebrate we the people of our Constitution and our Declaration. And so this is an opportunity in your community. There may already be a No Kings event, and you should look for it. Find it. You can go on the nokings.org website. It has all of the different towns and cities that have a No Kings event. If you're in a little burg of 500 people, you could create a No Kings event. There's nothing stopping you, no barrier. Anyone can create one of these. Go to No Kings, find out if there's a No Kings event in your area. And what you can do if you're from a faith community and you want to say, hey, you know what, let's show up. Let's show up as faithful people and say, we don't support kings either. You could have a gathering of faith people beforehand and then all go together down to the No Kings rally. So we're just hoping that you will show up, that you will feel invited to this moment in our country when we have a guy who's really trying to make himself into a would-be dictator. You know, the imagery is terrible of him. You can just imagine him with his this is Bone Spurs guy. This is the guy who avoided military service, he called John McCain, who was a prisoner of war and a hero, he called him a loser for getting caught. I like people who didn't get caught, he said about him. He has denigrated the military, but now he wants the pageantry. He wants it to look like these are all his people. This is his army. No, we have to show up en masse. And so please take this seriously. Show up for No Kings. You can find out how on the Interfaith Alliance website, No Kings Faith, or just go directly to nokings.org and you can find out all stuff there. This is all about showing up, celebrating democracy, and not letting this little pageantry show in D.C. take the limelight. We want to show how ridiculous that is by the people showing up around the country. So please join this mass movement. We're trying to get 5 million people into the streets. So please join us. These are peaceful gatherings. No, this is an opportunity to have a good time, make a sign, get out there and celebrate your country and celebrate that we don't have kings and we don't want a king. And we certainly don't want a king named Trump. And now to my guest. Reverend Jim Wallis casts a long shadow on the landscape of progressive faith and values in our country. The founder of Sojourners Magazine and the Sojourners Christian community, he's been at the forefront of bringing together faith and social justice activism. Jim has been advocating for issues such as racial equity, poverty alleviation, peace, and environmental stewardship for decades as a preacher, teacher, best-selling author, and theologian. Wallis currently serves as the founding director of the Center on Faith and Justice at Georgetown University and is organizing a very public event in the nation's capital on June 10th. I'm eager for all the details, and so, Jim Wallis, welcome back to the State of Belief.
Thank you, Paul. Always so good to be talking to you, always.
So one of the reason we're really talking today, and I really want to focus on this, I want this to get on our listeners' radar. This is going to be really important. You are planning, along with other folks, a major event on June 10th at the Capitol. What was the impetus for this? What is it? And then we're going to get into how people can join in.
Yeah, this is really a moment coming up that we're going to respond to. And what's interesting, Paul, and you know this, all this religious history, but liturgy and legislation don't often align or resonate, nor should they, right? But this time they do. So in the Christian tradition, one of our many faith traditions, my tradition, Pentecost is a season where I love the image of the disciples, early Jesus followers, hiding in an upper room because they're scared. Mm. They're being ruled by fear. They're afraid of retaliation. Sound familiar?
Yeah. I'm feeling
and
you.
And then in our tradition, the Spirit comes and they find courage. And what do? They go to the streets. And they speak in the streets, a public witness to the gospel in the streets. And this just transforms them and really begins the early church. So this year, Pentecost Sunday is June the 8th, and we're going to do something on Pentecost Tuesday, June the 10th, because there's a bill coming to the Senate just about that time. It's called the Reconciliation Bill. The House will have their bill done by then. And it promises to have major cuts, slashes, devastating cuts to Medicaid. Remember, that's care for the sick. and SNAP, feeding the hungry. So caring for the sick and feeding the hungry should not be a partisan issue. You and I have talked a lot about our histories. My conversion passage was Matthew 25,
Right.
where Jesus says, as you've done to the least of these, you've done to me. I was hungry. I was thirsty. I was naked. I was sick.
I was a stranger. All of this.
I was an immigrant. Yeah.
Yes, all of it.
I was in prison. It was
That's
me.
right. Yeah,
I called
yeah,
it
right.
was me text.
Yeah, right.
So a lot of us.
We didn't know it was you. Yeah. So
Had
so,
we known
okay,
it
so
was you, we would have started a social action committee or something.
Yeah, but so this is I love what you're saying. I mean, I love this idea of like being ruled by fear and then just deciding. And the image that is often used on Pentecost is like this fire coming down.
Yeah, fire.
And,
is the right word.
and so so getting the fire inside of people and saying, okay, we're not going to be cowering in fear. We're going to show up. And so I think I love this idea of liturgy and legislation. I agree they should not be superimposed. We're not trying to create that, but we are saying that those of us who do follow a Christian tradition, the listeners, for those of you who do follow a Christian tradition, this is an opportunity for us to show who we are. And so what exactly are you hoping will happen on June 10th?
Yeah. Well, fire is the right word. We need a fire now inside of us that people can see. So we're asking clergy and their congregants to come to Washington in their robes and collars. Now imagine the visual scene here. Outside the Congress, the Senate steps, we're going to have a procession. I'm calling it a procession, not a march. It's a procession. Clergy. We'll have church choirs there singing. We'll have people in their stills. Catholic Women Religious Network is all over this. So we'll have all these people of faith showing up by the hundreds. I'm hoping 500 to 1,000 actually, to say, here's who we are, and we're here to support those who are the least of these, the most vulnerable, the ones Jesus taught us to protect, regardless of your politics. This is for us a faith issue. Right. And we're saying a budget is a moral document.
That is like one of those key, once you hear that, you can't unhear it. The budget is a moral document, and it doesn't mean and a budget can be an immoral document. It really depends on who it's serving, how you understand it, and what we want and what we say our faith tradition demands is a moral document that reflects our values.
Well, think about a budget for a family, for a business, an organization, a school. Budgets tell us who and what is important and who and what is not important. And I'll give you this little backstory. I'm not sure I've ever shared it. Years ago, I was invited to a meeting with some Democratic senators. And they were saying, how do we talk about these issues differently? We're seen as the tax and spend liberals. And for us, it's not that. What is it? I said, why don't you think about a budget as a moral document? So that was the first time that got talked about. Now it's a phrase that, but coined by the faith community,
right
now on the Hill. So this is a Pentecost call for a moral budget.
It really is. And I think you are naming, just some of what is in this bill. But there is just so much that is, I think that, cutting services for really, I mean, I was thinking about years ago, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I was thinking about how effective the Republicans were when we were trying to expand healthcare access. And they said, oh, you want death panels. And then that became the word that everybody was talking about. And everybody had to answer a question about death panels, which was absurd. But they introduced it into the lexicon. And I'm just thinking about it's like, no food for students, no food. I mean, there's this budget actually has real life implications. I'm thinking so much about what Representative Al Green did when President Trump was giving his address, and he just said, "You have no mandate," and it's so true. He barely won. He won by a sliver, and yet here we are, like these drastic cuts. And so, I think it's just so important. There is no mandate to cut Medicaid, which is real lives. This is real lives we're talking about. So I just think it's so important that we show up. And one of the things you and I have talked about for decades now, I think, is what does it mean? Who gets to own religion and religious morality in this country? And for years, the right tried to say, oh, we're the God people. And it's like, well, really? Are you? Based on what? And I think this is an effort in part to say, no one owns God, by the way. And certainly with what has been happening for the last 4 months in our country, or 5 months now, is cannot be reflected as a moral mandate or. So I think it's really important what you're trying to do, and Interfaith Alliance and myself especially is very proud to be a part of it, is just to show up and with a visual reminder that no one owns religion, but certainly this budget does not reflect the religious will of the country.
Well, that's so well said, Paul. Let's think of this June 10th action as twofold. We want to change a vote and change the narrative. Change the vote and change the narrative. We have a chance to change this vote. There are Republican senators who don't want to see these Medicaid cuts.
Right.
And some of them are actually Republican people of faith who think this is just wrong. And so we're hoping for some bipartisan support here.
I love it.
I'm talking with Senator Coons, Senator Warnock, Senator Bennett, Cory Booker, of course, and they think the time has come for a show of faith, not partisan politics, but faith at the Senate. And so we may have some other senators alongside. And so, but also change the narrative. That's so important what you just said. The narrative is out there. There is a narrative out there that says all Christians or most Christians support Donald Trump. And those who don't are being silent. Well, neither of those is true. But we want to show, in fact, that when you count all Christians, Black Christians and Hispanic Christians and Asian Americans and a number of white believers who are breaking from the religious right and all of that, there's a lot of us. There are tens and millions of us.
Yeah.
And so we're going to show up and change the narrative that a lot of us as Christians can't support all these things because they go directly against the teachings of Jesus. And I want to say, I'll be bold here, cutting from our budget the very people Jesus taught us to protect is literally anti-Christ. And we'll have other people of faith. Quakers are all joining us for this, and networks of Christians, whole denominations are joining us. So this is just taking off because, Paul, I think it's becoming a moment.
I agree.
Impact the debate and to change the narrative.
Change the narrative. But I really think, what I really like about what you're saying is that this isn't just a show. This is actually to try to impact a vote. We could actually impact the vote. And there are people out there who would, are looking for a way to be courageous. I think Republicans, there's many Republicans out there who are really, looking for a way to be courageous. And I think the hope is here that some of those who are more moderate would be willing to break this way, especially with, the invitation a broad coalition of Christian leaders out there. Of course, the other traditions as well, but this is particularly a Christian action. Up next, much more with Jim Wallis. You can hear full episodes of The State of Belief anytime on our website at stateofbelief.com. You'll also find links to topics we discussed this week, as well as transcripts and more. And make sure you subscribe at stateofbelief.com/subscribe. You're listening to The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet. Welcome back to The State of Belief. I'm Interfaith Alliance President, Reverend Paul Brandeis Raushenbush. My guest is Sojourner's founder, Reverend Jim Wallis. Tell me how you envision, there's some of us who are, on the East Coast. Many of my listeners are across the country. Not everybody is going to be able to up and, come. But is there a place, do you have a landing page for this information, or can we create one? Can we imagine one where people can learn more about it and maybe urge their friends who are in Virginia or Maryland or, who could go down for the day? What is the way to invite people, as many people as possible, who want to show up in a positive way? By the way, this is by the books. You have permission to be on the Capitol. None of this is no one's being invited to break any laws. We're actually, I think, do I have that right? This is not a non-compliance effort. This is really, but it is really an effort to show up.
This is a witness, a public witness,
right?
From Pentecost, going to the streets.
Right.
When that fire comes and that courage rises up to go to the streets. And so we've been talking to the Capitol Police. They've been very accommodating and friendly. We're going to have a lovely procession there in the Capitol area, culminating in a vigil on the steps. And so you'll have people reading. There are 2,000 verses about the poor in the Bible. 2,000 verses.
People forget that. If you cut out all the verses about the Bible, about the poor in the Bible, you'd have a very holy Bible. And I don't mean HOL. I mean it would be filled with holes.
You may not know the story, but when I was a seminarian way back in the day, our little group, the group that became Sojourners, took an old Bible and cut out of the Bible every single reference to the poor. The prophets disappeared, the Beatitudes, so much in the Gospels, the Gospel of Luke, Mark. And when we were done, the Bible was literally in shreds. I could hardly hold it together in my hand. It was a Bible full of holes. It was a holy Bible, as you just said, not a holy Bible.
Yeah.
And I would take it out to preach with me, and I would say, I'm just a seminarian now. I would say, brothers and sisters, this is the American Bible. It's full of holes from all we have ignored and paid no attention to and literally taken out.
Yeah.
So there's a new Bible out there, the Bible Society and World Vision did, that's putting all those verses back together again in the Bible, restoring all those scriptures to the Bible. So we'll be doing that. We'll be restoring the scriptures. So procession, singing. I think we may have people come with handmade signs about those verses that are so important to them.
Right.
Which of those texts motivates you? So we'll have Bible, we'll have prayer, we'll have singing, and then we'll have a real visible presence on the steps. But let me add, Paul, that you're right. Changing a vote is possible here. It's possible. And so the last thing we're going to do after our vigil and prayer and scripture reading on the steps with some senators there to listen is to go into the Senate and have meetings face to face in robes and collars with our senators.
Mm-hmm.
They'll make appointments ahead of time. And so all these clergy won't just be outside. They'll be then going inside to have real conversations with senators, particularly senators who are on the edge, who are not sure, and who are open to what faith says here, not just politics.
Yeah.
So it's a full day of bringing our best faith tradition to the Senate and talking with senators face to face, who I think a number of them will be willing to talk to clergy and heads of denominations and bishops and all kinds of folks who are joining us here about what it means to care for the sick and feed the hungry.
You know, it's just so important to remember that a lot of these, these efforts, these programs, Medicaid, SNAP, even Social Security at its basis, and all of the protection against exploiting workers and all of that. Faith communities were very involved in the creation of those and bringing moral support and political pressure to legislators and imagining this. Part of this is like this continuity. There's a great tradition in America of faith communities imagining a better world. Like we have both things going on at the same time. You and I know this very well. But it's not as though we're coming in at this end point and saying, oh, let's do something new with faith. Actually, we're continuing an amazing tradition that is a through line of people motivated by their faith to end slavery, to invite women to the vote. There were always faith people at any one of these moments, and we have to decide for ourselves. This is our moment. How are we going to show up as faith people? And it's just really important to recognize we're not like kind of innovating something new here. What we are is taking the baton and moving it into this moment and saying this is now our race to continue and invite as many people as possible into it.
To make that historical point that you just did is so important. Most of our social movements in this country have been animated by people of faith. It's never just people of faith, but all these movements, civil rights, of course, and the early women's suffrage movements and abolition of slavery. These were faith communities at the core and center of these. Now, right now, let's bring it up to date with our history. We have a Pope Leo, a new Pope Leo.
Yeah.
And
Very interesting.
What's the name? A lot. So when Pope Francis, just before he chose his name, he was elected sitting next to a colleague from Latin America who said, "Don't forget the poor."
Right.
And that's what decided him to choose Francis. And that
something?
name, his name, Francis, has transformed the church and the world. Now, this new Pope from Chicago, a guy named Bob from Chicago.
And the biggest, John, just to interject, like the big drama right away was like, is he a Sox fan or is he Cubs fan? Like lots of like arguing about that. But that's not the point you're trying to make. But it was just funny, like this idea of like a homegrown guy and like the people in Chicago are like fighting over which baseball team he supports.
Well, to be a White Sox fan, which apparently he was, even a Cubs fan, is to believe in impossible faith right there. But then he was chosen, the first American Pope was chosen despite his being an American. The Cardinal said he was the least American of all the other American officials who were there. He's lived most of his life in the global South, in Peru, Peruvian citizen. He began his priesthood in the hills of Peru with the poor and marginal. And so he brings a whole different perspective. And now we're all learning who Leo the 13th was, who he named himself after. He's been called the father of social justice, and others want to make social justice a bad word now, as you know well.
Yeah.
But he laid the foundations for what we're calling Catholic social teaching.
Yeah.
He laid those
100%.
foundations. So here's this Pope. He didn't call himself Francis II. He called himself Pope Leo XIV. So I'm looking, and he was, just as you say, on the side of workers
Yeah.
who were exploiting the Industrial Revolution, the poor, the vulnerable. That's where he picks up on Francis' legacy. But Leo is going to be a voice now, a voice in this country because he's a global pope, but he comes from the south side of Chicago.
It's very profound moment, and there's been a lot of spin, and more conservative Catholics are really trying to spin this in a different way, and he's very toes the Catholic line on issues like abortion and LGBTQ. We're waiting to see, but on issues of social teachings around around the poor and around it's not the poor in the abstract. It's like how should the church intersect with things like legislation,
Right.
that and it gets very tactical and it gets very particular. So I think that's a really interesting kind of background to this. I know you're talking to some potential bishops to join on June 10th. But what I really want to close out with is saying that this is a big invitation to my listeners, to all of our listeners on the State of Belief, but more broadly to the American people. Even if you can't make it to D.C. on that day, I can imagine using that image and using the event of June 10th and all of these passages on the poor read and this great image of all these clergy, using that maybe to make a call to your senator, maybe to make a call to your representative and say, I just want you to know this is where I show up. And I feel it's really important that we have a moral budget that represents my faith beliefs. So, I just want to.
This is the moment.
This is the moment.
As you said, this is a moment, and I think the way it's come together so quickly has really deeply encouraged me. I have these calls yesterday, again this morning. Gamaliel just joined a big network, and all our faith networks want to join denominations. I've never seen something grow this fast. And I think it's because it's a moment. It's a moment for finding our courage, having that fire in us, and we'll show it on the Senate grounds, but also in a way that could change things, that could make this budget more moral. I think we can maybe do that, and we got to act like we can do that, and it will change the perception of what religious leaders are saying or not saying. Because we're saying, here we are in this Christian event, but others joining us is saying, we're going to stand with the teachings of Jesus here. We're going to stand with what he said about how you treat the sick and the hungry. And so that goes beyond our politics. And I think there are a number of senators who are willing to see it that way. But the presence of all these clergy in their robes and collars will make that absolutely clear. So invitation, Paul, is the right word. Invite all of the people who are part of your wonderful network to come. There's going to be room for all of us there. And there will be a chance to write letters to senators, even if you can't come. Write letters and make calls, and then there's a follow-up to that. It'll be a couple of weeks then before they finally vote. So we'll have a chance, even back home at some of their offices, some of their key places around the country. So I'm feeling, Paul, the moment that you just described as something like I haven't felt before in a long time. And it's the right time for a moment like this to come for our faith communities. Yeah.
I think it's just really powerful to, this is 4 days before, the president has his plan on his birthday to spend millions and millions and millions of dollars to have a military parade so that he can look impressive in what he views as impressive, and as having the military as a prop for himself, and I think this is like just kind of the exact opposite. And so, all of these things are going to happen in close proximity to one another, and we have to recognize, like, the kind of the power of showing up in this way, and having a procession of the kind that we're going to have versus, demanding, it's like it's like a spoiled boy demanding a parade for himself on his birthday and using the military, who have rightful pride to be 250 years old, but using them as a prop and spending millions and millions of dollars, which apparently we can't feed school children with, because the little wannabe dictator Bone Spurs needs his parade. So I think it's really important to have also, like, in mind that this is a procession and a witness in the context of the broader things that are going on that are very dangerous.
And to teach us again, to help us remember that moments can change things.
Yeah,
we're always worried about results, and we can't control results. But moments can change things. So this will be a moment coming before that very different kind of authoritarian moment just days afterwards. Mm-hmm. But I think the visibility, the visual power of this at the Capitol on that day will be clear. And I believe that in God's timing, Thomas Merton always told us you can never know what God's going to do, but you can decide what you're going to do. What you're going to do.
That's right.
And God uses that in ways we can't even control, comprehend, predict, or understand. But this is a moment. I'm feeling this moment to be a decisive one. So I want to invite everyone to come. You'll be with lots of friends and colleagues and fellow believers. And we're going to have just, I think, a very special time again.
And just to be clear, this, Reverend Wallis is speaking, but he is alongside so many other leaders from different backgrounds, different traditions within the Christian church, who are all joining together. So this is an opportunity for us to show up together. Reverend Jim Wallis is the best-selling author of books like God's Politics, Why the Right Gets It Wrong and the Left Doesn't Get It, America's Original Sin, Racism, White Privilege, and the Bridge to America, and The False White Gospel, Rejecting Christian Nationalism, Reclaiming True Faith, and Refounding Democracy. Jim is the founder of Sojourners Magazine and the Sojourners Christian Community, and serves as the founding director of the Center on Faith and Justice at Georgetown University. Jim, thank you so much for this time on The State of Belief.
Well, I love talking to you, as I said before, always, but this one especially, and that you're involved in this means a great deal to me. And this is us together. When you look at all the logos of the groups who are doing this, whole denominations and networks, Black churches, Hispanic, Asian American, mainline denominations, evangelical Christians.
Yeah.
This is a time when we're going to be all together.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on The State of Belief. We really appreciate it.
Bless you, my brother.
The words I'd like you to listen to have stayed with me since I first heard them. You might have heard them too. If you stayed up late on April 1st during Senator Cory Booker's 25-hour Senate speech, when Senator Chris Coons of Delaware joined him on the floor. This was about hour 20 of the speech. And it's when they really got into the Bible, what it means to them, but also what it might mean for the nation as we consider a moral budget.
How do we judge our nation? What measure do we judge America? Is it by how tall our buildings are? Well, those are great marvels, but other countries have taller buildings. God, maybe Ezra Klein has got me so focused now on making our nation do bold and build great things, but does the speed of our rail, as an Amtrak guy, speak to the greatness of our nation? No, other nations have faster rail. Does the wealth of our people, we have more billionaires than any other country, does that speak to the greatness of our nation? No. I think the things that speak to the greatness of a nation is, how do we take care of each other? How do we take care of our elders who deserve our respect and our reverence and gratitude for building America, for sustaining America, for doing the hard jobs to raise families, to set the next generation on their way? I think we should be judged by how we treat our children. They are the only true hope we have of seeing tomorrows that we will never live through. I think we should be judged by how we treat the sick. Whether it's people with the disease of alcoholism or mental health or crippling cancers or chronic diseases, what do we do? I think we should be judged by how we nurture our families. God, we put American families under crazy stress. Affordable child care, paid family leave. Other nations, our competitors, have these things. I think we should judge the greatness of our nation by how we treat our veterans. These honorable men and women. Some of them who gave their last measure, the last measure of their devotion, on fields across the world, from Thailand to Gettysburg. They gave their lives. And those who came home, the America they experienced will speak to the truth of who we are. And so I'm in this place like you're in this place. We've been friends for a long time. I'm blaming you a little bit because you're one of those people I called and said, hey, I'm thinking about running for governor. I'm thinking about running for senator. You told me to come here, man. I'm joking. I love you for it. I'm honored and blessed that New Jersey sent me here. I know that you and I are working to, and let's talk like we talk when we're not on the floor of the Senate. We both are deeply devoted Christians. You told me one of my favorite stories in the Senate, which I won't tell right now. I've been asking you to tell that story. I hope you'll tell it, but it's just about how your parents, James Baldwin said, children are never good at listening to their elders, but they never fail to imitate them. You are a great reflection of the stories of your parents you told me. And you and I grapple with this faith of ours, which demands the most radical love. Radical love. What does the Bible say about immigrants? I mean, come on. What does the Bible say about the poor? What does the Bible say about the hated, the prostitute, the leper, the people who are looked down upon? What's the story of the prodigal son? What's Matthew 25 say about how we should live? Even as to the least of these, you did unto me. How many times does the Bible mention poverty? How many? 2,000. I'm abiding by it. I will not yield to you. But I knew you would know it and I don't. 2,000 times it mentions poverty. And does it say we should scorn the poor? Does it say we should ignore the poor? No, it calls us to love our neighbor. No exceptions to that.
Will the senator yield for a question?
Thank you, man. I've been waiting for that question. The prayers of the righteous availeth much. You are a righteous man. I have a lot of work to do. So I yield for a question while retaining the floor. I tried to instigate you, Chris. I tried to throw out Jesus bait.
You have, sir.
Good, thank God. I yield for a question about whatever you want to ask me for, but I'm retaining the floor.
To my good friend and colleague, as we transition to comments about the economy, are you familiar with the very first time that Jesus stood in his home synagogue in Nazareth to preach? He read from the scroll a passage from, I believe, Isaiah 61, verse 1 to 2. This is recorded in Luke chapter 4, and it is a well-known passage. And I rely upon it to understand what was the ministry of Jesus centrally about. He says, "This is fulfilled in your hearing today." The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. I don't think it is possible to read the Gospels and to read the Torah and to understand righteousness without hearing over and over and over in the course of the Old and New Testaments a call to respect those at the margins of life, a call to be generous and open-hearted and kind to those who suffer and struggle, to be attentive to and present to those who are in prison, who are widows, who are orphans, to allow the gleaning of a field, which means to make sure that out of the abundance of our productivity on our farms, we make sure that we feed those who hunger here at home and abroad. You cannot miss the central message, which is, as you have said, kindness to those on the margins, attentiveness to those in need, good news to the poor.
Who do you know who would get a lot out of this discussion with Jim Wallis? Please share The State of Belief with them and be sure to subscribe to The State of Belief at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. We need your help to keep making The State of Belief, so please make a financial contribution today at stateofbelief.com. That's stateofbelief.com. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of Religion News Service or Religion News Foundation. The State of Belief is produced by Ray Kirstein and is a production of Interfaith Alliance. Become a member today at interfaithalliance.org. And be sure to join us next week. I can't wait. Until then, I'm Paul Brandeis Raushenbush on The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet.